Good morning, church.
Good morning.
Bryce and I were talking this morning that we can't wait for tomorrow. Big boy season's coming. Somebody's going to finally open that north gate. We're going to finally get a little bit of cooler weather. And it's mid-October. It's already mid-October. Am I the only one taking it? It's already mid-October. Thank you. I finally get a wow. It's going by fast. And I'm firmly convinced that I'm not slowing down. It's just everything else around me is speeding up. I guess I'm probably not the only one in that boat. This morning we're going to be in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. And we're going to be talking about the grace of giving. And a lot of times preachers struggle with talking about giving because everybody wants to run strictly towards giving of their money. And it's always kind of a touchy and dicey subject sometimes. But giving is not always about money. Giving is always about attitude. Always. One of the most powerful stories that I heard on giving came from a lady that Sean and I went to church with when the first year that we were married at Kilgore. And when she was a young girl, her dad owned a business, a very lucrative business with several employees. And she asked her dad, why is it that we live where we live? You know, just about every community, you have your gated community, you have your upper crust community, you have your middle class, you have your lower class, and you have your poverty. In just about every community. And the owner of a lucrative business was choosing to live in a middle class, possibly maybe even a little bit of a lower middle class part of the community. And she asked her dad, why do we live here? Why are we driving around in a Chevrolet when your employees live in the upper crust part of the town and your employees are driving Cadillacs? And he told her, I choose for us to live where we live. You have everything you need. You have clothes in your closet. You have food in the pantry. You have a roof over your head. You have air conditioning in the summer and you have heat in the winter. You lack nothing. I give my employees richly. Because if we lived where everybody else lived as far as the upper crust or even in the gated community, I wouldn't be able to pay my employees the salaries they deserve for the skill sets that they bring to the table. And consequently, I would have more overtime of employees. He understood where the backbone of his business was. His business was the foundation of the people who worked for him. His employees were the backbone. And if his employees weren't taken care of, he didn't have employees. And if he didn't have employees, he wouldn't have a business. Gracious giving. That story has always stuck with me. And it's been 20 years since she's told that story, and it's still stuck with me. An important element of Christian giving and of Christian service is that of giving. And following the New Testament pattern, taking up the collection we lay by and store on the first day of the week. We read that in 1 Corinthians 16, 1 through 2. We read that quite often in our offering. With such benevolence, we seek to provide for the work of the church. And so then, what is the work of the church? Taking care of each other, the needy saints, if you will. making sure that our brothers and sisters are taken care of in their time of need, making sure we're taking care of those who are going out into the world proclaiming the gospel, our missionaries. Also taking care of any needs that arise in our community that we may become aware of. It's coming fast. We do the collection of the food, remember, with the boxes and stuff for Thanksgiving. We have them all lined up. Taking care of people in our community who have not. And that's another thing to quite touch on a little bit. We do live in an area of affluency. But even in our area of affluency, I can take you to some homes. Brother Willett can take you to some homes, and Brother Wayne can take you to some homes. They're not affluent. I can take you to 2 homes right now that don't have doors on their, they don't have a front door, they have a sheet. That's their door. In our community. So we need to be mindful that in our community we still have those who are suffering. We still have those who are living in poverty. And so there's an interesting question. In what ways can we motivate Christians to give liberally? Many often appeal to the Old Testament examples of giving. The Israelites are expected to tithe. And the argument kind of goes something like this. God required the Israelites to give a tithe, that is 10%. And in the New Testament, we enjoy greater blessings than those under the Old Covenant. So our giving should be at least 10%, if not greater. Yet, the Apostle Paul, seeking to inspire the Corinthians to abound in the grace of giving, used an example of the churches of Macedonia. So let's look at 2 Corinthians chapter 8, starting in verse 1. We want you to know, brothers, about the grace of God that has been given among the churches of Macedonia. For in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed a wealth of generosity on their part. For they gave according to their means, as I can testify, and beyond their means, of their own accord, begging us earnestly for the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. And this, not as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord, and then by the will of God to us. Accordingly, we urge Titus that he had started, so he should complete among you this act of grace. But as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in all earnestness, and in our love for you, see that you excel in this act of grace also. I say this not as a command, but to prove by the earnestness of others that your love is genuine. You know, the Old Testament really is about giving out of compulsion. The New Testament is really talking about giving out of our free will. So compulsion versus free will. So we need to look at this for a second and say, well, okay, now, he says he wants us to know, brothers, about the grace of God that's given among the churches of Macedonia. That's how he starts this off. So we ask the question in this, well, then who are the churches of Macedonia? Well, I'm glad you asked that question. If you turn over to Acts chapter 16, starting in verse 11, we're going to find out about this church. Acts chapter 16, starting in verse 11, this is the conversion of Lydia. So setting sail from Troas, we made a direct voyage to Samothrace, and that following day by Neapolis, and there to Philippi, which is a leading city of the district of Macedonia and a Roman colony. We remained in this city some days. And on the Sabbath day, we went outside the gate to the riverside, where we were supposed to be. There was a place of prayer. And we sat down and spoke to the woman who had come together. And spoke to the women who had come together. One who heard us was a woman named Lydia from the city of Thyatira, a seller of purple goods, who was a worshiper of God. The Lord opened her heart and paid attention to what was said by Paul. And after she was baptized in her household as well, she urged us, saying, "You have judged me to be faithful to the Lord. Come to my house and stay." And she prevailed upon us. In other words, she kept insisting to come. I could keep reading, but I'm going to go through all of the verses 11 through 40. But I want you to notice something here. With the conversion of Lydia and her household, I want you to notice something in verse 15. In verse 15, she says, "Come to my house." Now, when you make that statement in this culture, that doesn't mean just come to the house for a visit. You're coming to someone's house, and you're going to be fed a meal. You're going to be taken care of. All of your needs that you have are going to be met and taken care of. Lydia is showing hospitality. This is an indication of the things to come. And the conversion of the Philippian jailer, we keep reading, and his family, he too also showed hospitality. Another example that may help us to appreciate, we will learn later on. Paul then had to leave abruptly because of the persecution. If you turn over to Philippians, it was written to them, in which we learn that they helped Paul through his missionary journey. And they had continued to suffer for Christ. Those are the churches of Macedonia thus far. There's something I want you to understand and look at first with this gracious giving. Go back to 2 Corinthians chapter 8. Something I want you to look at in verse 2. For in a test of severe affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty had overflowed in the wealth of generosity on their part. Now we know what this affliction was. Persecution. Being hunted down and killed for your faith and because of your faith. And yet, look at their attitude. Their attitude was that of joy. Out of their extreme poverty and overflowed a wealth of generosity on their part. For they gave according to their means, as I can testify, and beyond their means of their own accord. Not only so much that, they were begging to do more. So my question then for us today is, what is our affliction? In what ways are we suffering? In what ways are we being persecuted? Now we can look at our culture today, and we can see that Christianity is being attacked every day. We seem to be doing our dead level best to remove God from everything as a country and as a culture. But I would challenge that. Because that's scare talk. And that's fear tactics. You know, we talk about all the things that are going on, and one of the things we want to say is, well, what else is going to happen? We take God out of government. We have taken God out of politics. We've taken God out of schools. And if we've taken God out of these things, what's there left? I want to challenge us with this question. Since when has man ever had the power to remove God from anything? If you felt that God has been removed, maybe it's because you haven't been standing up for what's right and speaking out. I'm not talking about speaking out dogmatically. I'm not talking about speaking out in harsh tones. But I am talking about speaking out for the love of God and the truth and representing God in the way He wants to be represented and the way He says for us to represent Him. You see, these people here in Macedonia were representing God in their time of affliction. That is, when they were being persecuted, hunted down, and killed. But yet they rallied together, meeting a need. You go down and you look in Acts chapter 17 at the church of Thessalonica. We read of its beginning in verses 1 through 10. Many there were converted. Persecution against them soon arose, requiring Paul to leave suddenly. The epistles to the Thessalonians were written to this church. They also had their trouble. But they excelled in the matter of brotherly love. So what characterizes their giving? They gave sacrificially. Look at verses 2 and the first part of verse 3 of chapter 8 of 2 Corinthians. We've seen that they were in the midst of a great affliction. They were experiencing poverty themselves, yet they gave beyond their ability. This they were not expected to do, but what they eagerly wanted to do. They also gave joyfully. Somehow, they discovered the joy of giving. Many of you probably can finish this sentence. Attitude reflects leadership. Who is your leader? Who is your leader? If Christ is King in your life and He is Lord in your life, then your attitude reflects that of the King. And if your attitude is not reflecting that of the King, then you need to ask yourself, who have you replaced Him with? Or what have you replaced Him with? And let's get back to reflecting the attitude of the King. Perhaps they took to heart the teaching of the Lord relating to the blessedness of giving that we find in Acts chapter 20 and verse 35. James to the value of persecution. In James chapter 1, 2 through 4, we can find passages upon passages about affliction and about how people still held on to the Lord of their life and reflecting the attitude of the King. In any case, this is the kind of giving that God loves. Notice also in verse 3 that they gave voluntarily. They were freely and willingly giving. This is the kind of giving God requires of us today. We cannot command people to give against their will. We can only command that it is be done to help needy saints abroad. Giving must come from a willing mind. Giving must never be done begrudgingly or because you have to. That's an attitude problem. Otherwise, you might as well not give at all. And see, here's something that's interesting about this giving. What did God give us? What has God given us? Everything. And what is everything? He's given us His Son. Now, can you imagine knowing... Let me back up, because this is hard. You know, I'm a father. I'm a dad. And I can expect to send my son out somewhere knowing how he's going to be treated. Knowing that he was going to be abused and spit upon. Hit, lied about, persecuted, chased, insulted, beaten, and then finally nailed to a cross. If I knew that was going to happen, what kind of father would society say that I am? But yet God gave His best to people who were ungrateful. But praise God, He did. Because it changed our hearts. And it softened our hearts. And we put Him on in baptism. And we've accepted Him as Lord of our life. And our attitude should reflect that of the King. So we always want to run to money when we talk about giving. And that's not what we're talking about. It's part of it. But if we're going to reflect that of the King, then we go and must be about doing the things that our King and our Lord does. He gave us everything that He had physically for His 3 years that He was here on earth. We know through Scripture He's always been. And He gave us His Word for us to live by. Something else that we need to look upon in verse 4. They gave persistently. They were looking for ways to give more. And they were begging and imploring for ways to give more. Because here's what I understand that I think they grasped. They grasped what was given to them. And in turn, they wanted to give to others. You remember the story about the widow and her mite? What did Jesus say about this widow woman giving the last 2 pieces of money that she had? Does anybody remember what Jesus said about this woman?
She gave more than all the others.
She gave more than all the others. Now, is Jesus talking about money? She put it all in. Here's something we need to understand about Jesus. And understand about the Father. And this is something that the people in Macedonia understood. Because what is the very first thing they understood about this giving? They understood that the very first thing they must do is have God first in their life. So this widow woman, who gave out of her poverty, gave all that she had to God. And she put all of her faith and her hope and her trust in God. That's a hard concept for us today sometimes. Especially those of us who live in affluency. When we really don't know, or we have forgotten what it means when our bellies hit our backbones. Or our problem is what are we going to eat today? Instead of, am I going to eat today? And if we're not careful, we get dull to the things that are going on around us because we have somehow decided to put blinders on and not pay attention to the things that are going on around us. And we have stopped looking for ways to give more and more. They would take no for an answer. With the Philippians, we know that their giving to Paul persisted throughout his life. And here's something that we need to grasp in verse 5. They gave themselves. In other words, they gave of themselves. Perhaps this is how they were able to do what they did. They gave themselves first to the Lord. When a person does this, they don't worry about the cost of giving. They have the promise of Jesus. And that's another thing that sometimes we have a hard time grasping on to. Do you put all of your faith and all of your hope in Jesus Christ? Only you can answer that question. Having given themselves first to the Lord, it is only natural that they would then give to others. For such is a mark of true discipleship, and it is the mark of the true love of God. So, what an example to motivate us in the art of giving. Here are churches that were not expected to give because of their own poverty, yet they gave sacrificially, joyfully. They also gave voluntarily, they gave persistently, and they gave of themselves. And they gave to support the preachers in the spreading of the gospel, to help needy Christians in a foreign land, and to help an old preacher in his time of need. This church is a very giving church. This church has helped several members in this congregation that are still sitting here right now today when it was their time of need. They've also given when it really wasn't asked because they saw the need and were compelled to ask the question, what do you need? And when the answer was given, not only was it given, it was exceedingly more than what was asked. That is the attitude of this congregation, is to give and to look around to see who needs it. I would challenge us, let's don't lose that. Let's keep looking for ways to serve the Lord in His work every day. Let's look for the brother or sister who's struggling and then to come alongside them and help them bear a burden and help them carry a load. And if need be, carry the load for them until they can get back on their feet. You see, their example is much better than tithing. There are others we could offer to or to refer to. The supreme example that we have is Jesus Christ. So then I ask the question, what kind of givers are we? Those who give out of compulsion? With a grudging obligation? Or those who, like the Macedonian, beg for the opportunity to help? May the churches of Macedonia serve to remind us of what it is to be involved in gracious giving. We have a challenge set before us of this building that we're going to be building. Not a building that we're maybe going to be building, but a building we're going to be building. And we know it costs money to build. And we know it's going to cost a lot of money to build. So what is the purpose of building this building? I want to make it very clear. The building is not our hope. That's Jesus. The building is not going to solve all of our problems. Only taking them to Jesus will. But what the building can and will do is be a beacon in this community. To be a light that shines in this community. One of the things, and this is just one of the things I would like to use this building for, is for the hundreds of people that we have in this community who have opened their doors up to their homes to kids in foster care. And use this place, maybe even once a month, as a place to come together as a support group for those men and women who have decided to open up their homes and their hearts. So this is to be a safe place for them to come. so that we can minister to one another. That's just one thing. I'm not the only one who has hopes and dreams for this building. We all have them. We need to be voicing them. We need to be taking this to the Father and laying it at His feet, saying, we know that this is a big, tall task. We know that we're up against the 8 ball, so to speak, with the money. But we know that if we come to you in faith, Father, and lay it at your feet, that you can do exceedingly and abundantly more than we can ever imagine. The issue is do you believe it? The issue is do you have the faith and the trust and the hope that is planted firmly in Jesus to see that this happens? Because He didn't ask us to take the easy road. He's asked us to do some hard things. He's asked us to do some things that require some sacrifice. Incidentally, isn't that what He modeled for you and me? He didn't promise us a bed of roses. He said it was going to be a little bit tough, a little hard. But He did say, keep your eyes fixed on me. Finally, have you thought about what kind of recipient you are? Christ became poor that we might be rich, that we find in 2 Corinthians 8, verse 9. Have you accepted His gracious offer properly? Or has it been offered in vain? 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 1 through 2 says, when then, as workers together with Him, also plead with you not to receive the grace of God in vain. For He says, in an acceptable time I have heard you, and in that day of salvation I have helped you. Behold, now is the accepted time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. Let the Jews on the day of Pentecost be your example of receiving your gracious giving, as one ought to receive the grace of God today. Whatever your need is this morning, and however way that we can help you, we ask that you come now as we stand and as we sing.